In the sprawling, blocky landscapes of Minecraft, a world defined by its predictable rules and the player's near absolute control, a shadow has lingered for over a decade. It is a tale whispered on schoolyards, debated in late-night gaming sessions, and endlessly documented on forums and video platforms. It is the story of Herobrine, a figure as iconic to the game's culture as the Creeper or the Diamond Pickaxe, yet one whose existence remains shrouded in mystery and contradiction. This specter, said to take the form of the game's default player's skin, Steve, is distinguished by one single, chilling detail, a pair of blank, glowing white eyes, devoid of pupils, that stare out from the screen with an unnerving, vacant intensity. He is the ghost in the machine. The digital urban legend that has haunted the world's best-selling video game, a persistent question mark in a universe made of definitive, solid blocks. The legend speaks of a solitary figure who stalks single-player worlds, an unseen observer who leaves behind baffling and unnatural evidence of his passage. He is sometimes a passive wanderer, other times a malevolent trickster, and in the darkest corners of the mythos, a terrifying, aggressive entity. But the central question that has fueled countless hours of investigation, debate, and creative endeavor is a simple one. Is Herobrine real? To unravel this mystery is to journey back to the dawn of Minecraft's popularity, to explore the burgeoning culture of online horror, and to witness the birth of a legend that perfectly captured the anxieties and the boundless creativity of a new digital frontier. It is a story not just about a game, but about the very nature of community, belief, and the collaborative power of storytelling in the internet age. The genesis of this enduring myth can be traced to the chaotic and creative crucible of the internet in 2010, a 4chan board. In the annals of online culture, 4chan is a well-known primordial soup, a place where memes are born and die in minutes, where anonymity breeds a unique brand of raw, unfiltered expression. It was within its X board, a forum dedicated to the paranormal, conspiracies, and all things strange, that the seed of Herobrine was first planted. The medium was a creepypasta, a term born from the internet slang copypasta, which refers to blocks of text copied and pasted across the web. Creepypastas are, in essence, the digital evolution of campfire stories or urban legends, short, user-generated pieces of horror fiction designed to be shared widely and to blur the lines between reality and fantasy. They are tales like Slender Man or Jeff the Killer, modern folklore for a generation raised on screens. The original Herobrine post, now a hallowed text in the scripture of gaming lore, was presented as a genuine, first-person account of a deeply unsettling experience. The anonymous user recounted starting a new single-player world in Minecraft, a game that, at the time, was still in its alpha stage of development. In this solitary, procedurally generated world, the player was meant to be entirely alone. The only intelligent agent in a vast wilderness populated by simple, predictable animal mobs and mindless monsters that spawned in the dark. The player began the familiar routine, punching trees, crafting a workbench, and building a rudimentary shelter. As they explored, however, they began to notice things that didn't belong. Small, perfect pyramids made of sand appeared in the middle of the ocean. Inexplicably, need-to-buy-to tunnels were carved into mountainsides, far too regular and clean to be the result of the game's natural cave generation algorithms. Most bizarrely, the player found entire groves of trees with all their leaves inexplicably sheared off, leaving only stark, skeletal trunks reaching for the sky. These anomalies were strange, but they could perhaps be dismissed as glitches in the game's still-developing code. The true moment of horror. The core of the creepypasta came when the player, while turning around from a task, caught a fleeting glimpse of another character standing in the dense fog that limited the game's render distance in those early versions. The figure had the standard Steve skin, but even from a distance, something was wrong. Its eyes were blank and white. The player, startled and confused, tried to give chase, but the mysterious figure vanished into the fog as quickly as it had appeared. The user checked to ensure they were not accidentally in a multiplayer game, but the connection was secure. The world was single player. There should have been no one else. Haunted by the encounter, the player took to the internet, posting on forums to ask if anyone else had experienced similar phenomena. The post was met with silence. The forum topic was deleted within minutes. The user tried again. And again the post was removed. A private message arrived from a user named Herobrine. The message contained only a single word. Stop. The player, now deeply unnerved, attempted to view the profile of this Herobrine user, but the page 400 forwarded an error indicating it did not exist. The creepypasta then added a final, chilling layer to the myth. The player claimed to have been contacted by another user who had also seen the mysterious figure and had learned from other community members that Herobrine was the alleged screen name used by the deceased brother of Marcus Notch-Persson, the creator of Minecraft. The implication was terrifying. Notch had somehow embedded the ghost of his dead brother into the very code of his game, a digital specter doomed to wander the blocky worlds forever. This story, a masterful blend of plausible in-game oddities and a compelling, tragic backstory, was perfectly engineered to go viral. It was creepy, it was believable within the context of a game still in development, and it was deeply personal, tying the myth directly to the game's beloved creator. However, a story alone is often not enough to create a legend of this magnitude. It required a visual catalyst, a piece of proof that could be shared and analyzed. This came in the form of a calculated hoax orchestrated by a Minecraft streamer known as Copeland. On his Brawcraft livestream, a popular show within the nascent Minecraft community, Copeland staged an elaborate encounter with Herobrine. While streaming his gameplay, he led his viewers into a pre-constructed room in his in-game house. There, for a brief, shocking moment, the Herobrine figure, a reskinned player character, could be seen standing at the back of the room. Copeland feigned a scream of terror and abruptly ended the stream, leaving his audience in a state of frenzied speculation. He later released a photoshopped screenshot that clearly showed Steve with the iconic white eyes, though Copeland would later confess to the fabrication, explaining that he had simply retextured a painting to look like the Herobrine character. The damage was done. The legend now had a face. It had visual evidence that spread like wildfire across forums, YouTube, and the burgeoning social media landscape. The creepypasta had provided the narrative, but Copeland's hoax provided the icon, cementing the image of the white-eyed ghost into the collective consciousness of the Minecraft community and launching the legend into the stratosphere. With the narrative established and visual proof circulating, the floodgates of community speculation and myth-making opened wide. The story of Herobrine became a canvas onto which players projected their fears, their creativity, and their desire for mystery within the game's world. A wave of alleged sightings began to pour in from across the globe, each one adding a new layer to the expanding lore. These accounts were almost always accompanied by descriptions of unnatural formations, environmental anomalies that seemed to defy the logic of Minecraft's world generation. These phenomena became the calling cards of the spectral figure, the breadcrumbs that hinted at his unseen presence. The most commonly cited piece of evidence was the appearance of long, perfectly straight-to-by-to tunnels. Players would be exploring deep underground, following the natural, winding paths of a generated cave system, when they would suddenly break into a passage that was unnervingly artificial. 2 blocks wide and 2 blocks high, these tunnels would often stretch for hundreds of blocks in a dead straight line, sometimes lit with redstone torches, other times left in pitch darkness. For a player alone in a single-player world, stumbling upon such a structure was a deeply unsettling experience. It implied intelligence and purpose. The game's code generated caves with chaotic, organic shapes. It did not create perfect, man-made corridors. The immediate conclusion for a mind primed by the creepypasta was that Herobrine had been there, digging for some unknown, sinister purpose. Another frequently reported sign was the discovery of small, perfect pyramids in unlikely locations. A player might be sailing across a vast, empty ocean and suddenly see the tip of a pyramid breaking the surface of the water. Upon investigation, They would find a flawless 3 by 3 or 5 by 5 pyramid constructed from sand or gravel, materials found in abundance but rarely arranged with such geometric precision by the game itself. Other times, these pyramids would be found nestled in dense forests or hidden deep within cave systems. Like the tunnels, these structures were a hallmark of intelligent design, a clear deviation from the natural procedural generation. They felt like monuments or altars, cryptic messages left by an unseen hand. Perhaps the most visually striking and eerie of the supposed signs were the leafless trees. Players would report finding entire groves or patches of forest where every single tree had been stripped of its leaves, leaving only the bare, skeletal trunks and branches. This was a particularly potent image because it was not just the addition of something unnatural, but the subtraction of something natural. It felt like a blight, a sign of decay and malevolence. The world generation algorithm always created trees with a full canopy of leaves. There was no natural in-game mechanic, no fire spread behavior, no lightning strike pattern that could account for such a clean and selective removal of only the leaf blocks. It was as if a supernatural force had passed through, draining the life from the landscape that, in reality, each of these phenomena had a logical, if sometimes complex, explanation rooted in the game's mechanics. The infamous 2x2 tunnels were often the result of chunk errors. Minecraft's world is generated and loaded in 16 by 16 block sections called chunks. Occasionally, due to glitches in loading or saving, a chunk would fail to load correctly or would be regenerated with a new seed, creating sheer, straight cliff faces or, if it happened underground, perfectly straight tunnels along the border between the old and new data. The mysterious pyramids were a feature of the world generation itself, albeit a rare one. The code that generated desert temples and jungle temples could, on very rare occasions, have a bug that caused only a small part of the structure off in the pyramidal roof to generate, and sometimes in the wrong biome like an ocean or forest. The leafless trees were often the result of a simple glitch where leaf blocks, which are programmed to decay and disappear if not connected to a log block, would fail their check and vanish all at once. Other times, these sightings were simply the work of other players on multiplayer servers, pranksters who knew the legend and deliberately created these scenes to spook their fellow gamers. But logic and technical explanations held little sway against the power of a good story. The community was not just passively observing these glitches. They were actively weaving them into a rich and complex tapestry of lore. The mythos of Herobrine exploded, fueled by the collective imagination of millions of players. Fan fiction writers penned epic sagas detailing Herobrine's origins, his motivations, and his supposed relationship with Notch and the game's other mobs. Some portrayed him as a tragic figure, a lost soul trapped within the game's code. Others painted him as a purely demonic entity, the devil of the Minecraft universe, seeking to corrupt the world and terrorize its players. Fan art gave him a visual identity far beyond the simple white-eyed Steve. Artists depicted him with supernatural powers, surrounded by fire or shadow, wielding a diamond pickaxe with menacing intent. He was shown as a ghostly, translucent figure, phasing through walls, or as a terrifying, distorted version of Steve, his limbs contorted at unnatural angles. Video creators produced elaborate machinima series, using the game itself to tell dramatic stories of players banding together to fight against Herobrine's tyranny. These series often introduced new elements to the lore, such as Herobrine's ability to control other mobs, to manipulate the game's code directly, or to speak to the player through signs or in-game chat. He was given a personality, a voice, and a set of goals. He was no longer just a ghost. He was a character, an antagonist as well-defined as any in literature or film. This community-driven expansion was the true engine of the legend. It took a simple creepypasta and a handful of game glitches and transformed them into a shared cultural phenomenon, a piece of folklore that belonged to everyone who had ever felt that prickle of fear while exploring a dark cave alone. Herobrine became more than a myth. He became a collaborative work of art, a testament to the community's power to shape its own narrative within the sandbox they all shared. As the legend of Herobrine grew from a niche creepypasta into a full-blown cultural phenomenon, the pressure mounted on the creators of Minecraft, Mojang, and particularly on the game's lead designer and original creator, Marcus Notchpersone, to address the rumors. The community was abuzz with questions. Was this a secret feature, an elaborate marketing stunt? Or was there really a ghost in their machine? The official response, when it came, was consistent, unequivocal, and, over time, increasingly playful. From the very beginning, Mojang's stance was clear. Herobrine does not exist and has never existed in the unmodded, vanilla version of Minecraft. Notch himself was the first to tackle the rumors head-on. As the face of Minecraft and the central figure in the more elaborate versions of the myth, his word carried the most weight. In numerous interviews, tweets, and forum posts, he flatly denied Herobrine's existence. He explained that he understood the appeal of the myth and found it entertaining, but that it was purely a work of fiction created by the community. One of the most persistent and personal elements of the lore was the story that Herobrine was the digital ghost of Notch's deceased brother. This tragic backstory gave the myth an emotional weight and a sense of plausibility for many. Notch addressed this specific claim directly and publicly, stating in no uncertain terms that he did not have a brother, living or deceased. This was a crucial and definitive debunking of the core narrative that had been established in the original creepypasta. In a tweet from 2012, he stated plainly, "I don't have a dead brother, and he never was in the game. It's not real. It never was," despite such a clear and personal denial. The myth had already taken on a life of its own, and for some die-hard believers, even the creator's word was not enough. As Mojang grew and Minecraft's development became a team effort, the official company line remained firmly aligned with Notch's statements. Developers would frequently answer fan questions on social media and at conventions, patiently explaining that Herobrine was not a feature they had ever programmed into the game. They would attribute the evidence to the known bugs and glitches, such as chunk loading errors and natural generation quirks, that the community was misinterpreting. They confirmed that no part of the game's code contained an AI routine for a character that behaved in the manner described in the legends. No entity was programmed to stalk players, build pyramids, or strip leaves from trees. However, rather than simply shutting down the conversation, Mojang adopted a more nuanced and clever approach. They recognized that the Herobrine myth had become a cherished, if spooky, part of their game's culture. To simply ignore it or continuously issue stern denials would be to alienate a community that was having fun with its own creation, so they decided to join in on the joke. This led to the creation of one of the most famous running gags in video game history, starting with the Beta 1.6 update and continuing for many years across numerous major updates for both the Java and Bedrock editions of the game. Mojang began including a single, cryptic line in their official patch notes: "Removed Herobrine." This simple three-word phrase was a stroke of genius. For players who were in on the joke, it was a hilarious nod to the community's favorite ghost story, a playful wink from the developers that acknowledged the legend without validating it. It became a beloved tradition, with players eagerly scanning each new set of patch notes to see if the iconic line was present. For those who were new to the game or were true believers in the myth, however, the line had the opposite effect. It was seen as irrefutable proof. Why would the developers need to remove Herobrine if he was never there in the first place? This paradoxical effect only added fuel to the fire, creating a new layer of conspiracy and debate. Believers argued that Mojang was engaged in a cover-up, that Herobrine was a rogue piece of code they were constantly struggling to contain, and that each patch note was an admission of their ongoing battle with the spectral entity. The removed Herobrine line became a Rorschach test for the Minecraft community. You saw in it what you wanted to believe. It was Mojang's masterstroke, allowing them to simultaneously debunk the myth for those who understood the joke and to playfully perpetuate it for those who wanted to keep the mystery alive this long. Running inside jokes cemented Herobrine's status not as a real entity, but as an official, developer-acknowledged piece of Minecraft folklore, forever enshrined in the game's own historical documents. Years after the initial creepypasta and the subsequent storm of speculation, the question of Herobrine's reality has been definitively answered. He is a work of fiction, a digital ghost born from a clever story and nurtured by a creative community. Yet, despite this, his legacy has not faded. On the contrary, Herobrine has transcended his origins to become one of the most well-known and enduring legends in the history of video games, a figure as recognizable to a generation of gamers as Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster are to the world of cryptozoology. His silhouette, that of Steve with glowing white eyes, is an instantly recognizable icon of gaming horror. He has become a permanent fixture in the cultural landscape of Minecraft, a testament to the fact that a story doesn't need to be real to be powerful. The most tangible and interactive aspect of this enduring legacy is the vast ecosystem of fan-made modifications, or mods, that allow players to bring the legend to life. While Herobrine does not exist in the vanilla game, the modding community for Minecraft's Java edition has ensured that anyone who wishes to experience the thrill of the hunt can do so. These mods range from the simple to the incredibly complex. Some are basic jump scare mods, programmed to have the Herobrine figure appear suddenly in the player's field of view accompanied by a loud, startling sound before vanishing. Others are far more sophisticated, introducing a fully fledged AI antagonist into the game. These advanced mods program Herobrine with a set of behaviors directly inspired by the original legends. Playing with one of these mods installed transforms the single-player experience. Suddenly, you are no longer truly alone. You might be mining in a cave and hear footsteps behind you, only to turn and see nothing. You might return to your base to find a sign with a threatening message, or discover that your chests have been looted and your house set on fire. The modded Herobrine will actively stalk the player, leaving his signature calling cards, the 2x2 tunnels, the sand pyramids, the leafless trees as a warning. In some versions, he can be fought like a boss mob, a powerful entity with supernatural attacks. These mods provide a tangible way to experience the legend, to feel the paranoia and fear that the original creepypasta so effectively described. They have kept the myth alive and thrilling for new generations of players, turning a passive story into an active, heart-pounding gameplay experience. Ultimately, the story of Herobrine is much more than a simple ghost story. It is a powerful case study in the nature of modern folklore and the unprecedented power of online communities to engage in collaborative world building. Before the internet, myths and legends would spread slowly, passed down orally or through written texts, evolving gradually over generations. The Herobrine saga unfolded in real time, on a global scale, with millions of participants adding to the lore simultaneously. It demonstrates how a single creative spark, a well-told tale on an anonymous forum, can ignite a firestorm of collective imagination. The community took a simple concept and built a universe around it, defining a character's appearance, personality, motivations, and methods. They acted as writers, artists, directors, and programmers, collectively creating a rich and detailed mythos that has become inseparable from the identity of the game itself. Mojang's clever and playful response, acknowledging the legend as a beloved inside joke, further solidified its place in gaming culture. Herobrine stands as a monument to the creative potential that lies within a game's player base. A powerful reminder that sometimes the most memorable and enduring parts of a virtual world are not the ones designed by its developers, but the ones dreamed up by the people who inhabit it. He is not real in the code, but he is undeniably real in the shared experience and collective memory of the Minecraft community. A ghost who will likely haunt its blocky landscapes forever. In the digital expanse of Minecraft's procedurally generated worlds, a persistent ghost story has taken root, its tendrils wrapping around the very code and culture of the game. For years, the tale of Herobrine has haunted the blocky landscapes, a narrative that masterfully blurs the line between the tangible reality of in-game mechanics and the boundless realm of player-driven fantasy. This spectral figure, an enigma wrapped in the default player's skin, has become a subject of intense dissection, a legend whose popular myths stand in stark contrast to the established facts provided by the game's own creators. The mythos begins with a simple, yet profoundly unsettling, image. A ghostly apparition. The legend portrays Herobrine as a mysterious character who mirrors the game's original default player avatar, Steve, in every way but one. He possesses the same blocky physique, the same blue shirt and jeans, but his eyes are a chilling void. Where Steve's eyes have distinct white and purple pixels, Herobrine's are said to be completely blank, a solid, luminous white that stares out from the screen with an unnerving absence of life or emotion. He is the game's doppelganger, a familiar form twisted into something alien and wrong. According to the countless stories shared across forums and video platforms, Herobrine is a phantom who stalks players in their single-player worlds. This detail is crucial to the horror of the legend. Minecraft's single-player mode is designed to be an experience of profound solitude. The player is the sole intelligent agent in a vast, empty wilderness. The sense of isolation is a core part of the gameplay loop. It is you against the world. Herobrine shatters this fundamental assumption. His supposed presence introduces the terrifying idea that you are not alone, that an unseen intelligence is observing your every move. This creates a deeply unsettling sense of being watched, a paranoia that can transform the peaceful act of building a home or the adventurous spirit of exploration into a tense, nerve-wracking ordeal. Every flicker of movement in the periphery, every strange sound in a dark cave, could be him. This psychological terror is buttressed by a collection of supposed physical evidence, a set of unexplained phenomena that believers attribute to Herobrine's presence. These anomalies are the legend's physical footprint, the calling cards that suggest a supernatural force is at work, manipulating the very world around the player. One of the most frequently reported signs is the discovery of perfectly straight, man-made tunnels, typically 2 blocks high and 2 blocks wide. A player might be digging deep underground, following the natural, chaotic contours of a cave system, only to break through a wall into a passage of unnerving regularity. These tunnels often stretch for hundreds of blocks in a dead straight line, sometimes lit by redstone torches, other times left in an unnerving, perfect darkness. In the context of Minecraft's world generation, which prioritizes organic, random shapes, such a structure feels deeply alien. It implies purpose, intelligence, and a tool. It is the kind of tunnel a player would dig, which makes its appearance in a supposedly empty single-player world so disturbing. Another common sign is the appearance of small, flawlessly constructed pyramids in the most unlikely of locations. A player might be sailing across a vast ocean or trekking through a dense forest and stumble upon a small, perfect pyramid made of sand or gravel. These structures are too orderly, too geometric to be a product of natural generation. They feel like monuments or markers, cryptic structures left by an unseen builder. Finally, there is the eerie image of trees stripped bare of their leaves. Entire groves or patches of forest would be found with only their skeletal trunks remaining, as if some blight had instantly drained the life from them. This was not a fire, which would leave behind burnt logs, nor was it any other known game mechanic. It was a clean, selective act of destruction that added to the character's malevolent aura, the emotional core of the myth. The element that lent it a tragic and personal weight was the backstory of the deceased brother, a popular and widely circulated part of the legend, though now thoroughly debunked, is the claim that Herobrine is the ghost of the deceased brother of Marcus Notchpearson, Minecraft's creator. According to this tale, Notch had embedded his brother's spirit into the game's code as a form of digital memorial, resulting in a restless ghost forever wandering the worlds he helped inspire. This narrative element transformed Herobrine from a simple monster into a tragic figure, a detail that made the story far more compelling and believable for many. It grounded the supernatural horror in a plausible, if heartbreaking, human story. However, when placed under scrutiny, this entire edifice of myth crumbles in the face of factual reality. The foundation of the Herobrine story is not in the game's code, but in the fertile ground of internet folklore. The tale originated as a fictional horror story, a creepypasta, posted on an online forum. Creepypastas are the digital age's answer to campfire ghost stories, short, shareable pieces of fiction designed to be presented as true accounts to frighten and unnerve readers. The Herobrine post was a masterful example of the genre, blending plausible in-game glitches with a compelling narrative to create a story that was perfectly engineered to spread within the gaming community. It was never a real account of an in-game event. It was a work of creative writing from the very beginning. While the creepypasta provided the narrative, the legend's explosion in popularity was fueled by a deliberate and highly effective hoax orchestrated by a Minecraft streamer. A streamer named Copeland on his Broadcraft channel staged a fake encounter with Herobrine during a live broadcast. He carefully prepared the scene, likely by retexturing an in-game object to look like the white-eyed character, and then discovered it while streaming, reacting with feigned terror before abruptly ending the show. This visual proof, though fabricated, was the catalyst the legend needed. It gave a face to the name and provided a shareable piece of media that seemed to validate the story. Though Copeland later admitted to the hoax, the image of Herobrine had been seared into the community's collective consciousness, and the myth had already taken on a life of its own. The most definitive evidence against Herobrine's existence comes from the game's creators themselves. Mojang, the developer of Minecraft, has consistently, repeatedly, and unequivocally denied that Herobrine has ever been a part of the official and modded game. Marcus Notchpearson has personally debunked the deceased brother story, confirming that he does not have a brother. The developers have explained that the unexplained phenomena are all attributable to known bugs and quirks in the game's world generation code chunk. Loading errors creating straight-line cuts, rare structure generation bugs creating partial pyramids, and glitches in leaf decay mechanics causing trees to go bare. Despite community members poring over the game's source code for years, no trace of any AI or entity corresponding to Herobrine has ever been found. He is simply not in the game. Further cementing the fictional nature of the character is the long-running inside joke in the official patch notes. For many years, Mojang would include the line "removed Herobrine" in the list of changes for major game updates. This was a playful nod to the community, a way for the developers to acknowledge the enduring myth without validating it as real. For those in on the joke, it was a humorous and beloved tradition. For believers, however, it was often misinterpreted as proof, feeding into the conspiracy that Mojang was constantly fighting to remove a rogue entity from their game. In truth, it was simply a testament to the legend's cultural significance, a joke that confirmed Herobrine's status as an official piece of Minecraft folklore, not an official piece of its code. The persistence of the Herobrine legend, even in the face of overwhelming evidence and official denials, is a powerful example of how a community can create and sustain its own lore around a video game. The story took hold because it filled a void. It introduced an element of mystery and danger into what could otherwise be a predictable and safe sandbox experience. The desire for mystery and the primal thrill of the unknown have kept the Herobrine story alive. It's more exciting to believe that a strange tunnel was dug by a ghostly miner than to accept it was a simple chunk loading error. The legend gives players a shared narrative, a common enemy, and a set of campfire stories to tell. It transforms Minecraft from a simple game into a world with its own mythology, a mythology created not by the developers, but by the players themselves. The collaborative act of building the lore, writing stories, creating art, sharing sightings, fostered a powerful sense of community and shared experience that has helped the legend endure long after it was debunked. While Herobrine is not a part of the core game, players today can still have their own encounters with the legendary figure through the use of fan-made modifications or mods for the Java edition of Minecraft. The modding community has embraced the legend, creating numerous mods that inject Herobrine into the game world as an active and often hostile entity. These mods allow players to simulate the Herobrine experience, programming the character to exhibit all the behaviors described in the original stories. With a Herobrine mod installed, players may find their worlds being altered with his signature structures. They might be stalked by the white-eyed figure, and in some mods, they can even engage him in complex boss battles. These mods represent the final stage in the evolution of the myth, transforming it from a passive story into a tangible and interactive gameplay feature, ensuring that the thrill and the terror of the Herobrine legend will continue to be experienced by new generations of players for years to come. The story of Herobrine is not merely a ghost story whispered between players in the dead of night. It is a digital epic, a modern folktale forged in the chaotic crucible of early internet culture. To understand this legend is to dissect the very anatomy of how myths are born, propagated, and immortalized in an age of instant communication. It is a fascinating case study in the creation of a modern, urban legend within the unique, boundless confines of a digital space, a process that begins not with a bang, but with a simple, anonymous post that acted as the spark in a tinderbox of collective imagination. The narrative first flickered into existence in 2010. On the infamous image board 4chan, this was not a polished forum or a curated social media platform. 4chan was, and is, a breeding ground for internet culture in its rawest form, a digital Wild West where anonymity is king and memes, trends, and entire subcultures can be spawned and discarded in the span of an afternoon. It was on the X board, a forum dedicated to the paranormal, conspiracy theories, and all things inexplicably strange, that the seed was planted. The medium was a creepypasta, a portmanteau of creepy and copypasta, the latter being a term for blocks of text copied and pasted across forums. Creepypastas are the internet's answer to the campfire story, user-generated horror fictions designed to be shared and presented as genuine, unsettling personal accounts. They thrive on ambiguity and a low-fi sense of realism, making them perfectly suited for the burgeoning world of online horror. The original Herobrine post was a masterclass in this format. Written from a first-person perspective, it was simple, direct, and deeply unsettling. An anonymous user recounted the mundane act of starting a new single-player world in Minecraft, a game then still in its alpha phase of development, known for its charmingly primitive graphics and its profound sense of isolation. The player detailed the familiar routine, punching trees for wood, crafting basic tools, and seeking shelter from the monsters that spawned in the dark. The horror began subtly. The player started noticing things that were wrong, things that defied the logic of the game's procedural generation. Small, perfect pyramids made of sand appeared inexplicably in the middle of the ocean. Strange, to tunnels, too uniform to be natural caves, were carved into the sides of mountains. Entire groves of trees were found with their leaves mysteriously sheared off, leaving behind stark, skeletal trunks. These anomalies were creepy, but they were the prelude, the atmospheric buildup. The true terror came with the sighting. While working, the player claimed to have caught a fleeting glimpse of another character standing in the distance, partially obscured by the game's dense fog. It had the standard player skin, the now iconic Steve, but something was horribly wrong. The initial tale established the single most important and enduring element of the myth, the key visual identifier that would define the legend forever. The figure had the default player skin, but with eerie white eyes, blank, pupilless, and glowing faintly from the gloom. These eyes were the mark of the unnatural. The player gave chase, but the figure vanished without a trace. The post detailed the users mounting paranoid checking to ensure they weren't in a multiplayer game, searching online for answers. The narrative then added a layer of conspiracy. The player's attempts to post about the experience on the official Minecraft forums were met with swift deletion. A private message arrived from a user named Herobrine containing a single, chilling word, "Stop." When the player tried to view this user's profile, the page returned an error. The story culminated in the ultimate hook. The anonymous author claimed to have been contacted by another user who revealed that Herobrine was the alleged handle of the deceased brother of Marcus Notchpersone. Minecraft's creator. The implication was as brilliant as it was terrifying. A ghost was literally in the machine, a digital shade embedded in the game's code. This origin story, combining plausible in-game glitches with a tragic, personal backstory tied to the game's beloved creator, was the perfect spark. It was believable enough to be questioned, spooky enough to be shared, and mysterious enough to demand investigation. A story, no matter how compelling, often needs a visual anchor to transform from a piece of text into a widespread phenomenon. The Herobrine legend found its visual catalyst not in a genuine sighting, but in a deliberately staged hoax that provided the fuel for the fire. This pivotal moment in Herobrine's rise to fame was a staged livestream and a series of photoshopped images that gave the story a face, a tangible form that could be captured, analyzed, and shared. This evidence, though entirely fabricated, was compelling enough to convince many that the ghost in the machine was real. The architect of this crucial deception was a Minecraft streamer named Copeland, who hosted a channel called Brocraft. During a live stream in 2010, he cleverly orchestrated what appeared to be a genuine, terrifying encounter. While giving his viewers a tour of his in-game world, he led them into a small, pre-constructed room in his house. For a few heart-stopping seconds, a figure matching Herobrine's description, the default Steve skin with those vacant white eyes, was visible standing in the shadows at the back of the room. Copeland reacted with a convincing display of shock and terror, screaming before abruptly ending the stream, leaving his audience in a state of frenzied excitement and debate. The performance was masterful, but the real power of the hoax lay in the media it generated. Copeland later posted a screenshot from the stream, a still image that could be easily saved and distributed. In this image, carefully photoshopped for clarity, Herobrine was undeniable. The picture became the canonical depiction of the entity, the visual proof that the community had been craving. In an era when digital literacy was less developed and image manipulation was not as widely understood, the screenshot was a bombshell. It was passed around forums, dissected on message boards, and featured in the first wave of YouTube videos dedicated to the burgeoning mystery. The sharing of these images and videos across forums and early social media platforms amplified the legend's reach exponentially. The story was no longer just a text-based creepypasta. It was now a visual investigation. Believers pointed to the screenshot as irrefutable evidence. Skeptics analyzed it for signs of digital alteration. The debate itself generated content and engagement, further embedding Herobrine into the cultural fabric of the game. Copeland eventually came clean and admitted that the entire event was a hoax. He explained that he had simply retextured an in-game painting or a door to look like the Herobrine character and had staged the entire encounter. But the confession came too late. The legend had already escaped his control. The image had taken on a life of its own, and the power of that visual proof had firmly anchored the myth in the collective consciousness of the Minecraft community, providing the critical fuel needed to turn a small spark of fiction into a raging inferno of belief and speculation. With a compelling origin story and seemingly credible visual evidence now in circulation, the Herobrine myth was eagerly embraced by the Minecraft community, which began to collaboratively build upon the foundation. This was the point where the legend caught fire, transitioning from a story being told to a world being built. Players from across the globe began contributing their own stories, alleged sightings, and creative interpretations, taking the simple framework of the original creepypasta and expanding it into a rich and complex mythology. The community didn't just consume the legend, they became its authors. The forums and burgeoning YouTube scene were flooded with eyewitness accounts. These tales almost always followed a similar pattern, reinforcing the established lore. A player would be exploring their own solitary, single-player world when they would encounter one of the now famous signs. They would find a perfectly straight-to-bite tunnel boring through a mountain, a small and natural sand pyramid on a remote beach, or a grove of trees mysteriously stripped of their leaves. These shared experiences, Whether genuine glitches misinterpreted through the lens of the myth or outright fabrications designed to participate in the storytelling created a sense of a genuine, widespread phenomenon. The sheer volume of these reports made the legend feel more real. This collaborative storytelling process rapidly expanded the lore, adding new powers and behaviors to the character that went far beyond the passive observer of the original tale. Herobrine evolved, the community began to attribute any and all strange occurrences to him, effectively turning him into the catch-all explanation for every bug, glitch, and moment of unease the game could produce. He became more than a ghost. He became an active and often malevolent force. One popular interpretation was that of Herobrine the Griefer, a supernatural version of the common multiplayer pest. Players would claim to return to their meticulously constructed bases to find them burned to the ground, their chests emptied, and their farm animals slaughtered, with no culprit to be found. This version of Herobrine was a destructive trickster, a digital poltergeist who took pleasure in ruining the player's hard work. Another facet was Herobrine the Architect. He was credited with building elaborate and sinister structures far beyond simple tunnels and pyramids. Players would report stumbling upon complex underground dungeons filled with traps, strange redstone contraptions with no discernible purpose, or unsettling altars deep within caves. These discoveries implied a higher intelligence and a more sinister agenda. This community-driven expansion was a creative explosion, a decentralized act of world-building that gave Herobrine a personality, a range of abilities, and a palpable presence in the game, solidifying his status as Minecraft's very own player-created arch-villain. As the Herobrine myth reached a fever pitch, it became impossible for the game's creators at Mojang to ignore. The official response to the phenomenon was a delicate balancing act, a combination of firm denial and playful acknowledgement that proved to be a masterstroke of community management from the outset. Marcus Notchpearson and the rest of the Mojang team were clear and consistent in their public statements. Herobrine was not, and had never been, a real feature in the vanilla game. Notch personally addressed and debunked the most sensational part of the myth, the story of his deceased brother, stating plainly that he did not have a brother. Mojang's official denials, however, only seemed to add fuel to the fire for some believers, for those inclined towards conspiracy. The developers' statements were seen as a cover-up. They argued that Herobrine was a rogue element, a bug, or a piece of forgotten code so deep that even the developers couldn't control it, forcing them to deny its existence publicly. Every denial was twisted into further proof of a grander mystery. Recognizing that simply denying the legend wouldn't make it go away, Mojang pivoted to a more clever strategy. They embraced it as an inside joke. This led to the creation of one of the most famous running gags in video game history. With the release of Beta 1.6.6 and continuing in the patch notes for many subsequent major updates, Mojang began including a single, cryptic line, "Removed Herobrine." This was a brilliant move. For the majority of players who understood that Herobrine was a myth, the line was a humorous, winking acknowledgement of the community's creation. It was a sign that the developers were listening, that they shared the joke, and that they appreciated the culture that had sprung up around their game. It became a beloved tradition, with players eagerly scanning each new set of patch notes to find the familiar phrase. For the dwindling camp of true believers, however, the line had the opposite effect. It was irrefutable proof. Why would you need to remove something that was never there in the first place? This playful acknowledgement thus managed to simultaneously debunk the myth and perpetuate it, satisfying both skeptics and believers. It was a masterful way to engage with a fan-created phenomenon, allowing Mojang to control the narrative while playfully maintaining the fiction that had become such an integral part of their game's identity. Though thoroughly and repeatedly debunked, the legend of Herobrine has refused to fade away. Instead, it has entered a new phase of existence, transforming from a viral myth into an immortal piece of gaming culture with a powerful and tangible legacy. The desire to encounter Herobrine, to experience the thrill of the legend firsthand, led to the development of numerous fan-made mods that bring the character into the game. For players of Minecraft's Java edition, these mods make the myth a reality. This crucial step transformed a passive story into an interactive experience. Players could now download a file, add it to their game, and actively invite the ghost into their worlds. These mods vary in complexity. From simple ones that cause a white-eyed Steve to appear for a brief jump scare to incredibly sophisticated versions that introduce a fully featured antagonist. With these mods, Herobrine stalks the player, builds his signature structures, leaves taunting messages on signs, and can even be fought as a formidable boss. This ability to play the legend has given it incredible longevity, allowing new generations of players to engage directly with the myth long after the original hype has died down. Beyond the world of mods, Herobrine has transcended his creepypasta origins to become an iconic, albeit unofficial, figure in the Minecraft universe. He has achieved a level of cultural saturation that few fan creations ever do. Mojang themselves have continued to acknowledge him in subtle and not so subtle ways. He has been referenced in official Minecraft books, featured on merchandise, and has even appeared in official promotional material as a knowing nod to the community. At one Minicon event, attendees with a special cape could see Herobrine's face appear on it for a split second. This level of official recognition, even as a joke, has cemented his place in the game's canon of folklore. He is the ultimate testament to the power of community storytelling in the digital age. He is a character created not by developers, but by the collective imagination of millions of players. The story of Herobrine is more than just a ghost story. It is the story of how a community took ownership of a virtual world and wrote its own chapter into its history, creating a legend so powerful that it became an inseparable part of the game itself.